Hello everyone, this is Ashmita Das from IST Shivpur, and today I'm going to introduce a very new face and welcoming Shubham Om Prakash Patil to our channel of Prep Talk. So he's a student of mechanical engineering in our college and has successfully cracked the examination of graduate record examinations, that is the GRE, and will be heading to University of Michigan very soon. And he is going to pursue his master's on automotive engineering. Okay, so Shubham Bhaiya, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are
I'm
you? How is
also
it going?
good. Okay. And from when did you actually start preparing for GRE?
So I gave the exam at October 2020, and my preparation started at March. So it's not like that long of a preparation. For English, it took me that long to get to that level of proficiency. But maths, it's like a 1 to 2 months thing. The main point is to cover all the topics. What most people don't do and end up getting a less score is that GRE aptitude GRE quantitative can is of 170 marks, and you can score 170 or 170 if you cover all the topics. If you cover 165 and miss out 5 topics, then you fall short on the overall score. And no matter how much you study in English, you can't get above 155, like for an average student. So try your best to cover all the topics in maths, that is the quantitative, and you will have a very high GRE score. I would give anyone who is serious about GRE is to start today. Like just take a A4 size book, and there is Barron's 333 word list. Like it's a 300 word list. So every day write 10 words in it. Write those words, write their meaning in front of it, and the next day when you're writing next 10 words, revise these first. So as you go on, you have like 500 to 700 word lists of different kind of difficulty level, and you are very familiarized with them over a period of 2 to 3 months. And the sooner you do this, the better your chances are that you have a good score in English. So it's like the number one tip my seniors gave me, and I give to everyone who talks to me about GRE. Let's start today for at least for English. Maths you can do it in 1 or 2 months.
Yes,
Yeah.
great. So, what questions are asked during the GRE examination?
So I'll speak more about the verbal, that is the English section. So there are three types of basic questions. First type is the paragraph type, where you are given a topic and you have to write a big paragraph on it.
Mm.
Uh, so it's like a 1 hour thing. You have to write two different paragraphs. So for that you need to have knowledge of how to structure your paragraphs, how to structure your sentences, how to have like in less words you have to say a lot of things. So that's the first thing you need to focus on. After that, there are fill in the blank type of questions. There is one blank, two blank, and three blank. So and all of them have equal weightage. So you need to know the meaning of a word. Like every word has 3 to 4 meanings, and for cracking the GRE verbal, you need to know all those meanings. And more or less, the third or fourth meaning would actually be the solution. So it's very important to know all the synonyms and all the meanings of a particular word. And it only happens when you practice the vocabulary more and more. After that, there is paragraph question, short paragraph, long paragraph, and based on that paragraph, you have 5 to 6 questions. And the place where everyone is stuck are the long paragraphs because they are very long. You have to scroll 2 to 3 times to read the entire bit. So for that, I would say that start today and don't be hasty to crack these questions at the first go. It would take 3 to 4 months for a candidate to prepare for these type of questions if you want to crack all of them. So give yourself time, be patient. I would suggest take some courses or see some YouTube videos on how to approach. These teachers will tell you how to approach these long paragraph questions, these three fill in the blank type of questions. and the approach is the main thing you should take away from these lectures. Once you get that, you will have an idea that no matter what the topic is, you will know what to find in those paragraphs and how to collect the answers out of it. So that's the main strategy you should have at the back of your mind.
Yes, Bhaiya. And would you suggest some YouTube channel or any book by a specific author or publication which we can follow for GRE?
Yeah, I can share you those links in the like you can put them in the description. Top of my mind, I don't remember. I had subscribed to a lot of channels. And books, you can refer to the basic ETS books. And I have also made like a platform where these resources are available. You can put that in the description as well.
Okay. Do you think there is a need of any special coaching while you are preparing for GRE?
For English, yeah, because first of all, you need to practice those words. So what these sites do, like there is Jamboree, there is Mugush, they have these play cards where there is a word. If you click on it, it flips and it shows you the meaning of the word, and you can list it according to difficulty or like there are a variety of things. So that helps a lot to practice your vocabulary. Then you submit them questions of your essays and they review it. So that's very helpful. In terms of videos, it's not so helpful for maths, but for English it is really helpful. So I would highly recommend, if you don't have good proficiency in English, so you should opt for it because it will give you a better chance of having a good score. And also the exam fees is quite high, so you can't give it again and again. So it's good to have the best score in the first attempt.
Yes, Bhaiya. Was it your first attempt only?
Yeah. Mine was the first attempt.
Okay. And was it computer based or pen and paper based?
Yeah, it was computer based. So GRE is mostly computer based only, and that's the best way to give GRE, according to me.
Okay. Do they give any option or something that you can opt
I
for
don't think
paper
so.
based or
There's computer test only. I
compulsory
think
only? Yeah.
it's the best option.
So what was your experience while giving such an exam? Like firstly, the fees was high for the exam, and how was your mindset while giving the exam?
Like first of all, like when I was in like back last year in February, March, the first priority was to whether I should give the exam or not. So I contacted a lot of seniors and I made sure that the universities I am applying to requires GRE. So that's the first thing. Because due to COVID, a lot of universities have waived the GRE for the next 2 semesters. So it's not even required for current students. So just make sure if you need the GRE exam or not. If not, just then don't give it. Straight away, it's written on the website in bold that it's not required. And I think that answers your question. Just see if it's a requirement or not.
Okay. And would you suggest any internship which is going to help us in the long run? Research-based internship or something?
For master's application, right?
Yeah.
So the application requires 5 things. First is a GRE score if it's required. Then there is the IELTS. Then there is your statement of purpose, your resume, your transcripts, which mentions the CGPA, and then the personal statement. So suppose you drop the personal statement. So 4 things, and each of these things have equal weightage. It's not like that if you have a poor GRE score, you can't get admitted. If you have a strong SOP and a strong letter of recommendation, you have a chance to get admitted in the university. Okay. So yeah, so these 5 things are important. And when you talk about an internship or say a research project, so it helps a lot. It really helps a lot. So the best way to do a research project is to just approach a professor under your in your university. Just make sure that your area of interest matches with him. What he will do is he will give you a problem statement, or he will ask you what kind of area you want to focus on. So the first 2 months of your project should be just only figuring out what kind of problem you want to address. And then you read a lot of material on it. You read the research papers, you read the current work done under it.
Yeah.
After that, you can make small reports. And what every professor receives some sort of emails regarding weekly or monthly international conferences. So if you're in touch with a good professor, he will forward you the email What report you have made, you just have to convert it into their particular format, send it to them, and you have a conference paper at your hand. That's the way I did it, and it is as simple as that. No one knows it, and it's like a really big life hacks. So, and having a conference paper, it gives you a link, and it's good to share that link to the professors you are applying to, and it really puts up application like 5 to 6 times forwards against other applicants. So you can do this. It's highly recommended to get admitted. If you want tier one universities, then you have to do this thing.
Yeah.
Apart from that, you need a really good CGPA. For tier two to tier normal universities, above 8 is okay. But for say MIT, Stanford, you need 9.5 plus type of thing.
Okay.
They expect that. And if you have that, then you have a very good chance of getting admitted into this. Then industrial internships also help a lot because it shows you have a wide perspective. You are not just focused on one particular thing, you have hands-on knowledge. And when you do the masters, when you go into the labs, you know what kind of equipment there are and you know how to use them. It can be the software, core mechanical, core civil, it doesn't matter. Industrial experience, professional experience always helps. And whenever you're talking to some professional in a company or a professor, just point blank tell them that after 2 years or 1 year, I will be applying for masters and I need your letter of recommendation. I need it. And mostly he or she will agree to you. So if you have that kind of interaction with them, it's like a big support to your application.
Yeah. Okay, so you talked about the SOP, but how are we going to make a good statement of purpose?
Yeah, this is a really important question, and a lot of people ask me this. So first thing is to sit down, take a piece of paper and a pen, and write everything you have written in terms of your technical skills, the projects you have done, the internships you have done, what you have learned, what you have implemented. Write it down on a piece of paper. Segregate it in terms of areas. Uh, Say I am from mechanical, so there are production, maintenance, thermal, fluids, automotive. So just segregate it in these umbrellas and make small paragraphs out of it. The next thing to do is to know the format. When you want to write a statement of purpose, you need to know the format in which you have to write it. So you need to first read 5 to 6 SOPs who have already submitted their applications. You can download them from internet or ask your seniors, and once you go through them, you'll automatically know what kind of format you should write. uh, the first paragraph is always the introduction, and in the introduction you need to write in brief what kind of motivation you experienced as a child which pushed you to pursue engineering and pushed you to do this particular master's program. In small, you can say my father was from this background and etc etc, you can mention that. After that, the main thing is the contents of the paragraph, and it is important to know what kind of perspective you have while you write these things. You can either write that I have implemented, you can write I know. And there is a huge difference in these two things. When you say I implemented, it is assumed that you know these things and you have a very good proficiency in it. So try to always uh, frame it in a way that it looks good on you. And after 4 to 5 paragraphs, where each paragraph is of a project or internship you have done, the concluding paragraph should always be specific to the university. It should say that after my selection, or uh, after my process, during my master's process in this university, I would like to work under this professor, or I would be honored to do my research in this lab on this topic. So it shows that not only you have read about the university, but you are but you know that what you want to do in the next 2 years. And it can be only done once you go through the program website thoroughly. You see what kind of classes they offer, what teachers they are, what labs they have in the university, and try to mention it as much as possible in the last paragraph. So it
Okay.
really helps that way.
Okay, Bhaiya. How to make a attractive and really good resume? when you were applying for such universities?
So the first thing is to be involved in a lot of things. Like for writing a good resume, you need a good content. Like everyone can teach you how to have it like format wise and all, but you need to do good internships. And by that I mean that your knowledge, like whatever you are doing, try to do it in great depths. Try to have conversations with the people you are working with, see what kind of jobs they are doing and they are pursuing in their future. Each and every topic you study, put it like your rigorous work in it, so that when you write about it, intuitively it shows that you have a great depth of knowledge in that topic. It's not that you have just overlooked it at some point of your bachelor's. So that's the first thing. And you should be active in at least 4 to 5 things, like in your bachelor's, like 4 to 5 projects in terms of internships, or it can be even as frivolous as a particular problem you solved in a question, in a lab. You can also mention that in a CV, but it should have a very great depth of knowledge or experience from it. And once you have those things, you need to set a format. Go to Overly for any of these websites where latex websites where there are different formats for mechanical engineers or civil engineers or software engineers. Download the best one. Uh, Write the relevant courses. Like when you mention say IIST Shibpur, under that just write relevant courses and just mention 5 to 6 courses you have done in your fourth, fifth, sixth semester. It helps a lot.
Yeah.
After that, when you're writing about a particular company, say you have done an internship in XYZ company, in one line write what that company does. So whoever is reading your resume, if he's aligned with the same area, he knows that you are the person for this job, just because you have written what the company had done where you have interned in previous semesters.
Yeah.
Then point wise, try to write what you had implemented, what skills you learned, and what sort of problem statement you had either addressed or solved during your internship. Like it should always mention what you solved or what you implemented rather than what you learned, because everyone learns something or the other. So you have to stand out in that. Mention the programming languages, the different softwares you have learned so far, uh, and also mention them in how you use them to solve particular problems. I think that's the first thing you should do while developing a resume, drafting a resume. And format is the most important thing. So when you are applying for masters, what I had done was I had a 3-page resume. Like I had done a lot of things. So in my SOP I had 4 to 5 paragraphs and there were some things which were left, so I put those things in my resume. And it stretched up from 1 page, it went to 3 to 4 pages, 3 pages. And I had written these big paragraphs in detail. I had written what I had done in my projects. So it was not like a resume, it was just like a second part of my statement of purpose. And I think, I'm not sure, I think that was a hack or some kind of thing for me. But by that I was able to, in an elaborate way, I was able to tell them everything I had done in my bachelor's. So it's not recommended for job interviews, but for application process, you can have a 3-page resume where in detail you write everything.
Okay. Generally, in job interviews, everyone says that you should compact it to a single page only.
Yeah. But for application, they have an obligation to read the entire thing. So no matter how much you write it, they have to read it. So 3 pages is okay. And you have the liberty to also mention your co-curricular activities, any social services you had done, or any extracurricular you had done. So that way it shows that you are not just a bookworm, but you have an overall personality, and you have also a social life. And
Yeah.
that's not really important in STEM applications, but it's a good thing to write.
Okay. So, Shubham Bhaiya, what is a personal statement exactly, and how do you make one?
So for applications, like majorly in US, not every university requires a personal statement. So don't write unless you have a requirement. So it should not, like, you should not say in your application that one fine day I realized that there is a lot of job opportunities or a lot of money in US, and that's why I want to go to US. Like if you say something like that, it's like a straight away no from them side. So a personal statement should say that why you took engineering in the first place, then why you took this particular degree like mechanical, civil, whatever.
Mm.
After that, why you decided to go for this particular topic of masters. So you need to bring it narrower and narrower in a personal statement and address these questions in a very intuitive way. So tell them what motivated you as child to take engineering, what, and after you got motivated for say mechanical or civil, what did you do to fuel this motivation? Like what projects you do. Don't write technical stuff. That is everything covered in the SOP. Say you did a project, but midway you realize, like a lot of us realize that it's not good for me, or the mentor is not helpful, or I don't think I'm interested in this. So you can write that midway I realized that I'm not interested in this, and then I changed my topic to this area, and I did some things in this, and I realized that okay, I'm very good in this, and that's why I have decided. Like you should say, you should reason out how you came to this position, like what changed your
Yes.
mind over the few years, and that can be only done when you sit down and write on a piece of paper what your thoughts were when you were in 8th standard, when you were in 12th standard, when you were in first year, second year, third year, and just map it out for them to read. Because the main thing is that these three documents, resume, LOR, SOP, and personal statement, it is the only way for them to know what kind of person you are. They can't call your friends or your relatives or your dad to ask them if he's studious or if he's interested in this. You tell them about yourself. So make it a habit to tell them in a very intuitive and a very natural way, and explain it as good as possible. Like
Yeah.
not a lot of people focus on this, but I think it's very important to focus on these kind of things, at least when you're drafting it.
Yes, Bhaiya. Do you think we need to save money before we go to study abroad? Like, should we have our own savings at first hand?
uh, Before savings, what I will suggest is that you should ask your father if he feels the ITR or not. And if not, then urge him to do it right from this year, father or mother, whoever is working. Because an ITR gives you a lot of opportunities to apply for bank loans. Like wherever you go, it's like a basic requirement. And I have seen that not a lot of people or parents focus on this. Fortunately, my father did, and that's why I was able to apply for a loan. So that you should do. Even if you submit of 7 lakhs, 8 lakhs, it won't matter, but you should have an idea. And even if you don't have savings, you can always apply for a loan. And to answer the main question, savings, your expenses would go up to 60 to 80 lakhs or even 1 crore for 2 years, depending on what kind of school you go in.
Yeah.
So no matter how much you save, it is always going to fall short. So if your family can save for you, or if you can have some work experience and save for yourself, it's always helpful. But most of the students go for an education loan. And if you have a collateral, like if you have a property under municipal corporation, you can put that as mortgage, and 90% of the evaluation, you get an education loan. Either that, or if you don't have a collateral, you can get a non-collateral loan, but it has a higher rate of interest up to 11% per year. And based on the profile you have, at least 40 lakhs of loan you will always get if you have a tier 2 or tier 1 university. There are firms like HDFC Credila, Auxilo, Avance, Prodigy, which will
Yeah.
minimum support you up to 40 lakhs. And based on your profile, it may rise up to 60 lakhs also. So I have opted for that option. So even if you don't have savings, you can manage your finances through these loan companies. If you have collateral, go for SBI, Bank of Baroda, ICICI, and they will give you a rate of interest up to 7 to 8%. Above that, if you have someone in the United States who can say that yes, I know this person,
Yeah.
it need not be a blood relative or any relative. Even if a friend or any acquaint can write on paper that yeah, yes, I know this person, you get an education loan up to 3 to 4% from American banks. So if you think that because of finances or because of lack of funds, I cannot opt for this option, then don't think like that. Give the exams, do the application process, get selected, and at the end, always you can have some way or the other to manage these expenses. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think you should. And if you're serious about it, start today to think about, like, start right from today, consult these banking firms and get their profiles, what kind of loan they would offer you. Get in touch with them, start negotiating. So whenever you want to apply, it's like a 2 day process. You just pay them the fee and then they give you the loan. That's it. So as early you start, the more time you have to negotiate. So
Yes,
yeah.
Bhaiya. Keeping aside the loan thing, is there any possibility of getting a scholarship?
Uh, for PhD students, the program is fully funded and they earn. But for master student, US and Canada is like a money making machine. So they don't offer scholarships, to be honest. Most of the universities don't. So even if you go to their website for their national students, they would, but international we don't have much scholarships. So don't rely at all on scholarships. No matter how much a particular website says or publishes or advertises, it's very difficult to get scholarships in universities where the tuition fees is high, and these are the good universities.
Yes. What are the living expenses that we need to consider while moving abroad?
Yeah. Nice question. So on an average, 800 to $1,000 per month is the expense, and it covers your rent, the groceries, your insurance. You need to take a $150 insurance per month
Okay.
because medical expenses are huge. It covers your Wi-Fi, electricity, everything. So 800 is a bare minimum, where it's like a average normal lifestyle. And if you want better lifestyle, you are eating outside a lot. So up to 1,000 it would stretch,
Okay.
and you can always work part time there. So on a monthly basis, you can earn 600 to $500. So if you have 800 expense, then some of it you can cover on your own. That decreases what you have to borrow from your family or the loan.
Okay. And suppose if someone is like wants to study abroad, but before that he or she got a job there. Okay, and he started
Yeah.
working after 1 or 2 year. He wants to continue the job like for security basis, and on the other hand, he also wants to complete his studies. So, now, will it be difficult, or it is allowed, or it's completely okay doing it that way?
So what I would suggest is that for a lot of areas, minimum of 2 work of work experience is required, because once you go there, you complete your masters, you apply for positions, you will be competing against these people who have 2 years of work experience. And
Yeah.
if you don't have a good work experience, the people won't even look at your resume. They won't even look at it. So you should have 1 to 2 years of work experience, unless and until your field is very new or trending, uh, and no one has work experience in it. So that's the one field where you can be an amateur and it is okay. But other than that, you need to have some work experience to have a possibility of getting a very job, like easily getting a job there. Otherwise, it is a huge struggle. And one to after 1 to 2 years of work experience, it is difficult to give these GRE kind of exams. So I would suggest that when you're doing the engineering, just give these exams. GRE is valid for 5 years. IELTS is for 2 years. IELTS is very easy. It's like a 2 week kind of thing. Just give the GRE in the third or the fourth year, and you're good to go for the next 5 years. And apart from that, the other processes you can do. But if you're trying to do masters and job at the same time, it's not possible. You can do distance learning kind of thing, but it doesn't
Yes.
help with your visa, because if you do the distance course, you won't have a H1B visa, or you won't be. I think you won't be allowed to work there even if you have a degree which is distance learning. So you need to be on American soil for at least 9 months to be allowed for internships or full-time jobs, CPT, OPT. So you need
Okay.
to be there in the American soil, as far as I know.
Okay. What is this university shortlisting process exactly? And when should we start it?
Uh, The university shortlisting is like a 8 to 9 months of job. If you want to do it correctly, and if you want to go to a university which is actually good for you,
Yeah.
and you're really serious about it. So the first thing is to uh, figure out what kind of area you want to either work in or study about, and it is very important. So just sit like with a piece of paper and write down what all interest you as a person. If you are from STEM, write all the things you what you can do or you have the skills to do, and it need not be from your background only. If you are from mechanical, it need not be restricted to that field. It can go to all the directions. Point these things out and just see what's the most repetitive kind of area. After that, search for universities based universities who are active in these fields. Not every university is active in all the areas they teach.
Yeah.
They have particular labs, or university is famous for a particular thing. Like Harvard is famous for law, but it also has medical literature and other kind of things, but it is famous for law. So just list down the universities, and don't try to think if it is tier 1 or if it has high fees or if it is at a very deserted location. Don't think about that. Just list these universities. Once you do that, it's up to you how many you want to apply for. For US, it is like $100 fees, 90 to 110. So average it is $100 fees. So if you have good finances, you can apply for 10, 15, 20, as many as you like. Mostly people apply to at least six. I did to three. So you can do to as many as you want.
Mm.
After having that list, you figure out that what is the best for you and divide them in three groups. First is the ambitious one, put 2 to 3 in this. Second is the moderate, which you know you can achieve, and third are the backup ones, which are low level, low to mid level, and you know for sure that you will get into this. And you have 6 universities at your hand. Once you do that, you call each and every relative and friend of yours who is either connected to this or studied through this or knows someone who has gone through this, and you speak to them. I don't know how many people know this, but it is very important to have customer review. Like you buy a
Yeah.
product, you have customer review. So you go to a master's degree, you spend 1 crore rupees, you need to know that you will have a 1 crore rupee job at the end of the day in this field where you are going for. So talk to these people, find them on LinkedIn, social media, Facebook, Instagram. You can always search for groups. You go to the university website, you see some clubs, you stalk these people, you connect with them, you ask them, is it worth it or not?
Yeah.
And they will tell you that, bro, this is not worth it, this is like waste of money. Half of them will straight away tell you, and then you'll realize that you are narrowing it down slowly and steadily based on your area of interest and what that city offers. So try to make it as coalesce as possible. Narrow it down to 4 to 5 universities. After that, you see what kind of labs they offer, if you really want to work in them, and if yes, you can mail the PhD scholars. It is listed that even they have their emails, the professors emails, the MTech students emails. Mail them, try to set up a meeting with them. They have an obligation to talk to you because they are the front face of the university, and they
Yeah.
will talk to you. So mail them, schedule a meeting, have some either WhatsApp calls or Zoom meetings with them, discuss, and then you will realize that okay, in this university, rather than this course, I would be more profound in this course, and that's why
Yeah.
you narrow it down. And that's why it takes like a 8 to 9 months, because if you sit for a day, you can anyways get 4 to 5 universities through Google search, and you can apply to them. But if you really want to make sure that it is good for you and it is worth it, it's like a 8 to 9 month process, and you do these things, and I'm sure you will have a very good short list.
Yeah. So you took after getting selected, you had to work a lot, no, really, for shortlisting these universities.
No, no, shortlisting
October
is
2020, you gave the exam, and
yeah,
it's
and I applied
August
at
2021. Yeah.
yeah, I applied at Jan 2021. Like 15th of Jan is the deadline for
Mm.
most of the US universities. So Like shortlisting, I mean that what universities you want to apply to, not what you admits you
You were
have
thinking about that
gotten.
before giving the exam only. You started thinking,
Yeah,
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 yeah, yeah.
okay.
Because it's right, like $1,000 is like 6,000 rupees. You apply to five, you spend 30,000 without knowing if it is good for you or even you will get
Yeah.
selected or not. So you need to make sure.
Does a good university confirm that you are going to get a good future as well?
No. So it's like a myth that Stanford or UMich or Texas makes sure that you have like a 1 crore profile. It doesn't really matter at all. Once you complete your masters, there is no company is going to come to your campus and hire you on the spot. You have to go to their website, apply there. You have to go on monster.com or other firms, or you have to search on LinkedIn, do job hunting, actual job hunting, and apply to them. And once you go to their interview, you will realize that they don't care if you are from good university or poor university. As far as you have a good skill set and a good knowledge, you are good to go. And the package is same. So if you spend 80 lakh rupees on say Stanford or UMich, and there is another person who has spent 40 lakh to 50 lakh on say Michigan State, both of you will work at the same profile and have a same job. And it does happen like that. A good university only makes sure that you have good opportunities, you have good alumni base, and how much you can exploit that depends on your capability.
Yeah.
It totally depends on what kind of personality you have. So even if you don't land a good university, go to whatever you are getting, take good courses, make sure that you have good connections, you build good references. In US, you will only get a job if you have a reference. They won't even see your resume if there is no reference. So connect with people, professors, industrial professionals, go to different conferences, meet people, tell them about yourself, know what they think, see where the industry is going, where the market is going. And once you build this connection, somewhere or the other, there will be a person who is working in a company, and it might happen that you are applying for the same job, and you may just ring to them and say that I'm applying. He may give you a reference, and you get selected.
What is this LORs exactly? I don't know.
Yeah, LOR is like a letter of recommendation. You can either have from a professor or a faculty, sorry, professor or a professional industry worker. As far as they have a like their email ID is from the company or from a university, it's good to go. Like it doesn't matter if the university, like the professor belongs from a small university or a national or an international. They don't care about it. It should just be an official person, and it's like a one page document. Most of the times you are yourself writing that document, and the professor will review it. If he agrees with what is written, he will just copy it under his letterhead, put the signature. And
Oh,
in US, during an application process, you fill the details of the professor. A mail is sent to him or her. He will just upload the PDF, and that's it.
okay.
So the main hack which I kind of I was fortunate to have was that whatever you write in your letter of recommendation, make sure that it is validating what is written in your SOP. In SOP, you have written that I have done a project under this professor, or I am have expertise on this topic, and the professor is also saying that yes, he is all having expertise on this topic, so it validates it.
Hmm.
Someone who is reviewing an application, he knows that yes, he is speaking the truth because this person is saying this. He is referencing it to this. So in LOR, don't write in depths about a particular software or the version of a language you know. Just write that yes, this student was very active and he was studious. He used to ask me a lot of, he or she used to ask me a lot of questions. Intuitively, we used to sit for a lot of problem solving sessions. He has firm knowledge in this particular software, and he used it to implement these skill sets or solve these problems. Just write these kind of things, and you can submit. You have to submit minimum 2 and maximum 3 LORs.
Yeah.
So what I did was I used two of the faculty members and one of the industrial professional under whom I had done an internship. So it made my profile very diverse. It showed them that I am not only an academic who has two conference papers, but I'm also interested in hands-on experience in like labor and footwork kind of thing, and that's why I have also interned in a company,
Yeah.
and this is the LOR from that person. And when you are having three LORs, make sure that all of them direct to different areas. Like even under mechanical there are different areas, so make sure that these direct towards, say one direct towards fluids, the other is towards production, the other is towards automotive. It shows that you have a very diverse background, you know a lot of things, you are not very niche, and it's not that you only know this topic and there is nothing else you know about in engineering.
Yeah.
Because you will think that no, I want to do cyber security only, or I want to do environmental engineering only in masters. But once you go there and once you see the courses, once you see the market, 100% you will shift towards different area. So if you show that no, I am very rigid and I won't move at all, it's not that I want to learn anything else but this, then you may be rejected. So
Okay.
make it diverse, make your resume diverse, but also not very broad that I know everything or I know little about everything. No, you should know 4 to 5 things, but in very good depths, and your LORs should validate it.
Yeah, would you like to share something about your experience?
One another point I would like to share is the application process for UK and Germany, which a lot of students have decided for in the last few years. So for UK they have rolling admissions, which means that you just submit your application and after 2 to 3 days they will tell you yes or no, as opposed to US where you have to wait 2 to 3 months. And that's a very good thing because in UK all the master's courses are of 2 semesters, that is 8 months, and in between you have to do some internship or something else, and that's why the tuition fees is also reduced to half. Living expenses are the same, but job opportunities are also good in UK. So all you need is a IELTS score. Most of them don't even ask for GRE. You need to submit your transcripts on your own. Only you have to submit the letter of recommendation. Like you have to upload it on your own. So that's a good thing. And SOP is also not required for all of them. So UK you have a very less requirement for application, and you know it like in 2 to 3 days. And they also have very good courses. So there is a university called Cranfield where I had got selected. There is Loughborough, Manchester University. There are many universities there. For arts, it is very famous. Like for in London, you have very good uh, art-related universities, and the process is easier. And not a lot of, like, I didn't know about it at all until the very last moment of my application. I just applied it like something uh, like frivolously, and I got selected. And I was
Oh,
like, wow, what the hell? As opposed to that, in Germany, there are two type of courses: English based or German based. If you want to opt for German based courses, you need to have A2 level of understanding, A2 proficiency certificate before applying. And for learning this A1 and A2, it would require 4 to 5 months, and you need to have some sort of coaching. You can do it online also. I did it online, and you can have A2 certificate in 4 to 5 months. The process starts from March and it goes up to September for most of the universities. You can always check out the deadline at the program website. You can apply to German universities, German based courses, because there are more courses and more universities and there are better job opportunities. But for them, you need a B2 level of understanding for application.
yeah.
For English based, you need A2. For German based, you need B2 to C1 level of understanding, like a certificate. So it takes up to a year and year and a half to reach B2 or C1. So if you can do that kind of investment and you are really focused on Germany, their tuition fees is waived. You just need living expenses. If you learn German, you can apply to Sweden and other neighboring countries where same courses are offered, and very good courses are offered in these European countries where tuition fees is waived off. And in Germany, application process is zero. So you can apply to as many you can have as many applications as you want. Just it
Okay.
begins from March and ends up to September for the fall semester. Fall semester begins from September.
Okay.
So yeah, this is what I would like to share. If anyone is interested, you can always ask in greater depths individually, like if you have specific questions.
Yes, Bhaiya. Yeah, why did you opt for College of USA rather than UK?
UK job opportunities are, I like from what I got to know, is not that much in the field where I want to work in, like
Okay.
self-driving vehicle. It all depends on what you want to work in, what industry you want to pursue. If there
Okay.
is a job market, if there is a industrial drive for that area in that country, just go to that country no matter what expenses there are. Because
Yeah.
if I had gone to UK or Germany where it's not that active, I would not have able to work in those fields, and then I would have to settle for something else which I don't want to do. So that's
Okay.
the reason.